She thought she would marry a disabled millionaire. Turns out everything was a lie. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get into the story. Imagine a rainy evening at a nearly empty train station. The mist was thick, and the cold air stung your face with each breath. Emily stood at the edge of the platform, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders. Her worn-out shoes clicked against the concrete, and the coat she wore, though once stylish, had seen better days. She could barely feel her fingers as she checked her watch, the time ticking closer to her final chance at a job interview. The pressure was unbearable. She had no money left for food, and her rent was due in 2 days. The train was late, and the anxiety gnawed at her as she anxiously scanned the platform. With no one around, the echo of her footsteps seemed to intensify her solitude. Then, a voice broke through the quiet. "Excuse me." It was a man, drenched from the rain, his clothes clinging to him. He looked tired, worn, and for a moment, she wasn't sure if he was real or a figment of her overactive mind. "I'm sorry," he said. "I had my wallet stolen, and I just need $10 to get home. I swear I'll pay you back. Please." Emily hesitated, looking at the crumpled $10 bill in her pocket. It was all she had left. The cold in her fingers reminded her of how badly she needed that $10 for herself to get a small meal after the interview. But there was something in his eyes, a look of genuine desperation that pulled at her heart. She didn't know why, but she felt compelled to help. Her hand trembled as she pulled the $10 from her pocket and handed it to him. "Here," she said quietly. "Just get home safe." The man's eyes lit up in surprise, and for a moment, he seemed almost overwhelmed by her kindness. "Thank you," he said, clutching the money tightly in his hand. Then, just as quickly as he appeared, he turned and walked off into the mist. Emily stood there for a moment, watching him disappear into the shadows. She wasn't sure why she'd helped him, but something about that brief encounter stuck with her. Maybe it was the warmth of the connection, even if it was fleeting. Or maybe it was just the simple act of kindness that made her feel like there was still a little good in the world. She shook her head and sighed, thinking about her next steps. "I can't afford to make mistakes," she reminded herself, pulling her coat tighter around her and heading toward the station's exit. Little did she know, that seemingly insignificant act of kindness was about to change everything for her. Days passed after the brief encounter at the train station, but Emily couldn't shake the memory of that moment. The sound of his voice, his weary eyes, the gratitude in his expression, everything about it felt surreal, like a dream. She found herself thinking about him more than she expected, wondering if she had done the right thing. After all, $10 was all she had left. What if he never paid her back? What if he wasn't being truthful? But deep down, she felt something, a sense of rightness in her decision. Still, she tried to push it out of her mind, focusing instead on her upcoming interview, the one she hoped would finally offer her a way out of the struggle she had been living. That evening, Emily made her way to the same train station, her mind racing. The job interview had gone well, she thought, but that didn't mean anything. The competition was fierce, and she needed to hear back soon. She had a few dollars left in her pocket, enough for a simple dinner if she was careful. As she walked across the platform, her eyes glanced around, but she didn't expect to see him again. He was just another stranger she had helped. But as she neared the edge of the platform, she spotted a familiar face, a man standing near the ticket booth, dressed sharply, though his expression was intense, focused. It was him, the man she had helped. He was looking at her, but his eyes didn't hold the weariness they had before. This time, they held something else, recognition, maybe even curiosity. Emily froze, unsure of what to do. She had been hoping to avoid any awkwardness, but here he was, standing not far from where she had given him her last $10. He waved at her, a smile tugging at his lips. "Hey, Emily, right?" he called out. Her heart skipped a beat. "I didn't expect to see you again," she said, forcing a smile. "I didn't expect to see you either," he replied, his voice calm but warm. There was a moment of silence between them, and Emily felt the old nerves creeping up. I was wondering if you had a moment, he continued. I'd like to talk to you. Maybe over coffee. His words were casual, but there was something about the way he said them that made her feel both nervous and intrigued. Coffee, she repeated, still unsure if this was all some kind of mistake. Yes, if you're free, he added, his gaze not leaving hers. I owe you more than just a thank you. Emily hesitated, glancing around. The station was quieter now. The hustle and bustle of the evening rush had died down, leaving the two of them in a bubble of strange, unexplained connection. Okay, she said finally, surprising herself. I could use a coffee. They walked together to a nearby cafe, the kind of place where the smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air and the low hum of conversations provided a comfortable backdrop. Emily sat down across from him, still unsure of what this meeting was really about. So, what brings you here? She asked, trying to sound casual, though her mind was spinning with questions. He chuckled softly, leaning back in his chair. Well, I wanted to start by saying thank you, he said. And also, I owe you an explanation. My name is David, not just David. I guess you could say I'm a businessman. Actually, I'm the CEO of a tech company, and well, I wanted to thank you for your kindness the other night. Emily blinked, taken aback. Wait, you're a CEO? Her voice faltered slightly. I didn't want to say anything at the time. I thought it would be better if I didn't. But after that encounter, I couldn't stop thinking about what you did. It meant a lot more than you realize. Emily wasn't sure what to say. This was unexpected. She had been sitting next to a CEO, a man who could have anyone at his table. Yet here he was, thanking her for something so small, something she had done out of instinct. It was just $10, she said quietly, unsure how to process this sudden shift in their dynamic. To you, it was $10. But to me, it was an act of kindness I don't see often enough, he said, his gaze softening. I don't know why, but I feel like there's more to you than just what you've shared. You're not just a waitress. You're someone who understands what really matters. Emily felt her chest tighten. She hadn't expected this conversation to take this turn. I'm just trying to get by, she said, her voice almost a whisper. It's hard. He nodded. I know it's hard. And that's why I wanted to ask you to join my company. I'm offering you a position. Not just any position, but a chance to really make a difference. To show the world what you can do. His words hung in the air between them, and Emily felt her breath catch. What? She asked, her voice barely audible. I want to give you the opportunity to build something for yourself, he said, his eyes steady on hers. I've seen something in you that most people overlook. You don't have to struggle anymore. She stared at him, her mind racing. Was this real? Could this be real? The CEO of a tech company offering her, a waitress, a chance to change her life? The weight of his words settled in her chest, and for the first time in a long time, Emily allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could change. The following days after their conversation in the cafe, Emily couldn't stop thinking about David's offer. A job, an actual career opportunity. It felt surreal, like something out of a movie. She had always dreamed of being part of something bigger, of doing something meaningful, but that dream had always felt just out of reach. Now, here she was, sitting in her small, cramped apartment, staring at the job offer email David had sent her. She had no idea how to process it. Could she really take the leap? Could she go from working as a waitress, barely scraping by, to working for a major tech company? The thought both excited and terrified her. The next morning, after a sleepless night of tossing and turning, Emily woke up to the harsh reality of her situation. The bills were still piling up, her rent was overdue, and her phone had just been shut off for lack of payment. But now, David had given her a chance to leave all of that behind. She stood in front of her mirror, examining her reflection. The woman she saw staring back at her didn't look like someone who deserved this opportunity, not someone who had spent years just surviving. But maybe it wasn't about deserving. Maybe it was about taking a chance on herself. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she dialed the number David had given her. Hello, Emily. David's voice came through the line, warm and reassuring. How are you feeling about the offer? Emily hesitated for a moment before answering. I'm scared, she admitted, but also excited. I don't know if I'm ready for this. You're more ready than you think, David replied. You've already shown that you're capable of kindness, and that's something that can't be taught. We can teach you everything else. I believe in you, Emily. The words, simple as they were, filled her with an unfamiliar sense of hope. Maybe she could do this. Maybe this was her chance to finally get out of the cycle of poverty and hardship. She took another deep breath. "Okay," she said, her voice firming up. "I'll do it. I'll take the job." "I'm glad to hear that," David responded. "You'll start Monday. I'll send over the details, and we'll take it from there. I'm looking forward to seeing what you can do." As she hung up the phone, a mixture of relief and fear washed over her. She had just agreed to something that could change her life, and she had no idea if she was ready for it. But one thing was certain. She couldn't keep living the way she had been. She had to take this opportunity, for herself, for her future. The next few days were a blur of paperwork, meetings, and new routines. Emily found herself stepping into a world that felt both foreign and exciting. On her first day at the company, she was greeted by a sleek, modern office, a far cry from the small, rundown diner she used to work at. The contrast was almost overwhelming, but she pushed past the feelings of inadequacy. David had believed in her, and now it was time for her to believe in herself. She dove headfirst into her new role, learning everything she could. She started small, taking on basic tasks, but every day, she felt herself growing more confident. David was patient with her, always offering encouragement and guidance. Slowly but surely, Emily found herself gaining more responsibility, and with each new challenge, her confidence grew. But despite the progress she was making in her career, there was still a part of her that questioned whether she truly belonged here. One evening, after a long day at the office, Emily sat at her desk, staring at her computer screen, her mind racing. She had come so far, but the doubt still lingered. Was she just an imposter in this world of successful, polished professionals? Was she truly worthy of the opportunity she had been given? Her thoughts were interrupted when David walked into the office, a friendly smile on his face. "How's it going?" he asked, his voice casual, yet concerned. Emily looked up at him, her emotions spilling out before she could stop them. "I don't know if I belong here," she admitted, her voice shaky. "I came from nothing. This world, this company, it feels so far removed from everything I've ever known." David took a step closer, his expression softening. "Emily, you belong here because you bring something unique to the table. It's not about where you come from or what you've been through. It's about who you are and what you can offer. And what you've shown me so far is that you have something special. You have heart, and that's more valuable than anything else." His words hit her like a wave, and for the first time since she had taken the job, she felt a sense of peace. Maybe she wasn't an imposter after all. Maybe she had earned her place here. David's belief in her, his unwavering support, was enough to make her believe in herself, too. That night, as she left the office, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of hope rising in her chest. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, she was excited to see where it would take her. Weeks passed, and Emily's confidence continued to grow as she settled into her new role. Every day, she felt a little more like she belonged in the world David had introduced her to. She was no longer the waitress from the small diner, struggling to make ends meet. She was part of something bigger now, something she never imagined possible. Still, even with all the changes happening in her life, there were moments when doubt crept in. She had been working hard, putting in extra hours, learning new skills, and earning the respect of her colleagues, but the fear of not being good enough still lingered. One afternoon, as she walked into the office, she overheard a conversation between two of her coworkers. "Have you heard? David's looking for someone to manage the new project. They say it's a huge opportunity, and he's already eyeing someone from the marketing team." Emily's heart sank. She knew the project was a big deal. It was the one David had mentioned to her on their first coffee meeting, the one that could make a real difference in the company. And yet, the thought of David selecting someone else made her stomach twist. She had worked so hard, but was she really ready for something that important? Later that day, David called her into his office. His expression was serious, but there was a warmth in his eyes that put her at ease. "Emily, I've been watching your progress closely," he said as she sat down. "You've exceeded my expectations, and I think you're ready for more responsibility." Emily held her breath, waiting for him to continue. "I've been thinking a lot about who should lead the new project, and I've decided I want you to take it on." Her mind went blank. She had expected a compliment, but not this. "Me?" she whispered, barely able to believe it. "Yes, you," David confirmed with a nod. "You've got the skills, the drive, and the heart to make it work. I believe in you, Emily. A rush of emotion flooded over her. The fear, the doubt, it all seemed to meld away in that moment. She had earned this. She had worked hard for this opportunity, and now, David was giving her the chance to prove herself even more. Thank you, she said, her voice shaky with emotion. I won't let you down. David smiled, his expression proud. I know you won't. You're more than capable of handling this. The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings, planning, and organizing. Emily threw herself into the project, working late into the night and learning everything she could. The pressure was high, but for the first time in her life, she felt alive with purpose. This was it. This was her moment to shine. As the days passed, she found herself growing even more attached to the company, to the work she was doing, and to the people who had come to support her. But there was something else that had been growing between her and David, something that neither of them had acknowledged yet. The more they worked together, the more Emily realized how much she admired him, not just for his intelligence and success, but for the kindness and integrity he showed every day. He wasn't just the CEO, he was someone who cared about the people around him. One evening, after a long day of meetings, David and Emily found themselves alone in the office, finishing up some last-minute details for the project. The atmosphere was quiet, the hum of the city outside barely audible through the glass windows. As Emily worked, she felt David's gaze on her. She looked up, and for a moment, their eyes locked. It was as if time stood still. Emily, David said softly, breaking the silence. I've been meaning to talk to you about something. Her heart skipped a beat. What is it? She asked, her voice betraying her nerves. David took a step closer, his tone more serious now. I know this might be unexpected, but I've been feeling something more than just professional between us. And I think you felt it too. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She had been trying to ignore the growing connection between them, but now that he had said it, it felt impossible to deny. I didn't know what to think, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. I've been so focused on my work, on proving myself. I didn't want to complicate things. I understand, David said gently, but I can't ignore how I feel. And I don't want to lose this chance to be honest with you. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken words and emotions. Emily felt a mixture of fear and excitement. This was uncharted territory for her, a world where feelings and career could be intertwined. But as she looked into David's eyes, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to choose between the two. I feel the same way, she finally said, her heart racing. But we have to be careful, David. We're both in a place where a relationship could complicate everything. I know, he said with a soft smile. But I'm willing to take that risk if you are. The air between them seemed to shift, the tension giving way to something deeper, something more real. They didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in a long time, Emily felt like she wasn't alone. She wasn't just the waitress turned employee. She was someone who had earned her place, someone who had a future ahead of her, a future that might just include more than she had ever dreamed of. In the following weeks, Emily and David found themselves navigating both the professional and personal aspects of their relationship. They worked closely together on the new project, and their connection grew deeper with each passing day. Despite the undeniable attraction between them, they kept things professional at the office, focusing on the task at hand, but there was an unspoken bond forming that neither could ignore. Emily felt herself opening up more, trusting David not just as a boss, but as someone who genuinely cared about her. He was different from anyone she had ever met, not just because of his success, but because of the kindness he showed to those around him. It was a kindness that had drawn her in from the very beginning. As the project neared its completion, Emily was more confident than ever. She had worked hard, and now, she was seeing the results of her efforts. She felt a sense of pride in what they had accomplished together. But even with everything going so well at work, there was still a lingering question in her mind. What would happen if their personal relationship came to light? Would it complicate everything they had built? Would their colleagues and the company see it as a conflict of interest? One afternoon, as Emily sat in her office, going over some final details for the project's launch, her phone buzzed. It was a text from David. Can we meet after work? I need to talk to you about something. Her heart skipped a beat. She had a feeling this conversation would be a turning point, but she wasn't sure in which direction it would go. That evening, they met at a quiet cafe, away from the office. The soft hum of conversations around them felt distant as Emily sat across from David, her nerves buzzing in the air. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice tentative. David looked at her, his expression serious, but there was a softness in his eyes that made her feel at ease. "I've been thinking a lot lately," he began, his tone measured. "About us, about the future. I know we've been taking things slow, but I don't want to keep holding back. I care about you, Emily, and I can't ignore it anymore. I want to see where this can go, not just as co-workers, but as something more." Emily's heart raced as she listened to his words. It was everything she had been feeling, but hearing him say it out loud made it feel real. She had spent so much time questioning whether she was ready for this, whether she could balance everything, her career, her dreams, and now her feelings for David. "David," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I care about you too. But what about the company? What about the project we've been working on? What if people find out?" David reached across the table and gently took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "We'll figure it out," he said. "I'm not asking you to choose between me and your career. I know how much this means to you, and I respect that. But I also know that I can't keep pretending like I don't want to be with you. You're more than just a colleague to me, Emily. You're someone I want in my life, both professionally and personally." The words settled in Emily's heart like a weight being lifted off her shoulders. She had been so focused on the fear of what might happen if they took their relationship beyond the office that she hadn't allowed herself to truly consider what she wanted. And what she wanted, deep down, was this, David. She squeezed his hand and looked into his eyes, a sense of clarity filling her. "I want this too," she said softly. "I want to take a chance on us, on me, on everything we've built together." David smiled, and in that moment, Emily knew that this was just the beginning. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but they had built a strong foundation, not just as colleagues, but as partners. And she was ready to embrace whatever came next. The next few months were a whirlwind. They continued to work together on the project, but now, their relationship was no longer just a secret. They were open with their colleagues, and to their surprise, everyone was supportive. The company saw the value in their collaboration and respected their professionalism. Emily found herself thriving in her new role, not just because of the opportunities David had given her, but because she had finally embraced who she was, someone worthy of success, love, and happiness. And through it all, David remained her rock. He was there for her through the challenges, offering guidance when needed, but always allowing her to grow on her own. He never tried to overshadow her accomplishments. Instead, he celebrated them. And as the project came to a successful conclusion, with Emily at the helm, David stood beside her, proud of everything they had achieved together. One evening, after a particularly long day of work, David took Emily to the rooftop of the building, the city skyline stretching out before them. The air was cool, and the lights from the city below sparkled like stars. He turned to her, his eyes filled with emotion. "Emily, I know we've been through a lot together," he said quietly, "but I want to ask you something that will change everything." She looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. "What is it? Will you marry me?" David asked, his voice steady but full of hope. The words hung in the air between them, and Emily felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She had never imagined that her journey, from a waitress struggling to make ends meet to a successful professional in a thriving relationship, would lead to this moment. But here she was, standing on the rooftop with the man she loved, ready to start a new chapter. "Yes," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "Yes, I will marry you." And as David slid the ring onto her finger, the city around them seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them in that perfect moment, knowing that they had both found something worth fighting for. The following months felt like a dream come true for Emily and David. Their relationship blossomed both personally and professionally, and as they navigated the challenges of balancing work and love, they discovered a deeper connection than either had ever expected. Emily's career continued to soar, and she was soon promoted to a leadership role in the company, overseeing multiple projects and making a name for herself as a talented and driven professional. With each success, she gained more confidence, not just in her work, but in her worth as a person. David stood by her every step of the way, his support unwavering, and together they faced the ups and downs of life with a sense of partnership that neither of them had ever imagined. But even as they celebrated their achievements, life had a way of testing them, and soon, an unexpected challenge emerged. One evening, as Emily sat at her desk, reviewing the final details of a new project, she received an urgent call from her mother. Her voice was frantic, filled with worry. "Emily, I need you to come home. Something's happened with your father. He's been taken to the hospital." Emily's heart dropped. She immediately left the office, rushing to the hospital to find her father in critical condition. The doctors told her that his health had taken a turn for the worse, and they weren't sure how much time he had left. The news was devastating, and Emily found herself torn between her career and her family. She knew she needed to be there for her father, but she also didn't want to let down the team at work or David, who had always been there for her. David was the first person she turned to when she arrived at the hospital, and he wasted no time offering his support. "Emily, I'm here for you," he said softly, taking her hand. "You don't have to go through this alone. Whatever you need, I'll be by your side." Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her. David's words meant more to her than she could express. He didn't just offer her professional guidance or company in the office. He offered her his heart, his unwavering presence during the most difficult times. As days passed, Emily spent all of her time at the hospital, helping her mother care for her father, and trying to come to terms with the reality of his condition. She knew that her father's time was limited, and the thought of losing him was almost too much to bear. Meanwhile, David kept in touch, checking in on her daily, offering words of comfort, and ensuring that she knew she wasn't alone in this. The night before her father passed away, Emily stood by his bedside, holding his hand as he slept. A flood of memories rushed over her. Her childhood, the sacrifices her father had made for their family, and the love they had shared. She leaned in close, whispering softly, "I'll make you proud, Dad. I promise." The next morning, her father passed away peacefully in his sleep. The pain was overwhelming, but there was a sense of peace knowing that he had been surrounded by love in his final days. Emily took a few days off to grieve, but when she returned to work, she found herself facing new challenges. She had to learn how to keep moving forward, not just for her career, but for herself. David was there every step of the way, his presence a constant source of strength. He never pressured her, never made her feel like she had to rush through her grief. Instead, he gave her the space she needed while offering support in whatever form she required. During this time, Emily began to truly realize how much David had changed her life. He wasn't just a boss or a partner. He was her rock. He had been with her through every triumph, every challenge, and every heartbreak. As the months passed, Emily found a new sense of balance. She learned to honor her father's memory while continuing to build her career, and she did it with David by her side. They both knew that life was unpredictable and that there would be more challenges ahead, but they were ready to face them together. One evening, as they walked home from dinner, hand in hand, David turned to her, his expression serious. "Emily," he said, his voice soft, "I know we've been through a lot together, and I want to ask you something." Emily stopped walking, her heart racing. "What is it?" she asked. David took a deep breath, as though gathering the courage to speak his truth. "I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" Emily's breath caught in her throat. The question was one she had been hoping for, but hearing it out loud felt like the culmination of everything they had been through together. She had found someone who truly understood her, who stood by her through the darkest times and celebrated her victories with her. She looked into David's eyes, her heart full of love and gratitude. "Yes," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "Yes, I will marry you." In that moment, everything else faded away. It didn't matter that their journey had been filled with obstacles, heartbreak, and uncertainty. What mattered was that they had found each other, and they were ready to face whatever came next, together. They shared a quiet, tender kiss, knowing that this was only the beginning of their forever. The months following their engagement felt like a whirlwind for Emily and David. They were both focused on their careers, their personal lives, and planning a wedding that would be a celebration of everything they had worked for and overcome. Emily, who had once been unsure of her place in the world, now stood confidently as a successful professional, a fiancée, and a woman who had found love in the most unexpected of places. But even with all the joy surrounding them, they couldn't escape the pressure of the world around them. As the wedding day grew nearer, Emily found herself increasingly overwhelmed. Between her responsibilities at work and the endless wedding planning, there were days when she felt like she couldn't breathe. The stress started to seep into her relationship with David, and though neither of them wanted to admit it, the cracks were starting to show. One evening, after a long day at work, Emily sat down on the couch in their apartment, exhausted. She had been up early, had back-to-back meetings, and then spent hours coordinating wedding details with her mother and David's family. She felt like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. David walked into the room, his expression soft, but there was a tension in his eyes. "Emily," he began, his voice gentle but firm, "we need to talk." Emily looked up, her heart sinking. She had known this conversation was coming, but she had hoped it wouldn't. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. David sat down beside her, taking her hand in his. "I know things have been stressful lately, with the wedding and everything else. But I'm worried about you. You're not yourself. You're pushing yourself too hard, and I don't want you to lose sight of what's really important, us." Emily's heart ached. She had been so focused on everything else, trying to make sure the wedding was perfect, trying to prove that she could handle everything, that she had neglected the most important thing, her relationship with David. "I'm sorry," she said softly, tears welling up in her eyes. "I've been so focused on everything, and I've been so afraid of disappointing everyone, of not being enough." David's gaze softened, and he cupped her face in his hands. "You don't have to be perfect, Emily. You never have. I fell in love with you because of who you are, not because of what you do or how much you accomplish. We're in this together, and we'll face whatever comes our way together." His words hit her like a wave, washing away the pressure she had been carrying for so long. She realized in that moment that it wasn't about the wedding, or the job, or the expectations of others. It was about the two of them, about the love they shared and the life they were building together. Emily took a deep breath, letting his words sink in. "You're right," she whispered. "I've been so focused on everything else that I've lost sight of what really matters. I don't want to lose us. I don't want to lose you." David kissed her forehead, his touch warm and reassuring. "You won't," he said softly. "We've got this. Together." In that moment, Emily realized that the journey they had been on was not just about achieving success or meeting expectations. It was about finding balance, trusting each other, and supporting one another through the highs and lows. The next few weeks were filled with changes. They decided to scale back on some of the wedding plans, opting for something smaller and more intimate, something that reflected their relationship and the life they wanted to build together. The stress of trying to please everyone faded, and with it, so did the pressure. Emily found herself reconnecting with the people who mattered most, her family, her friends, and, most importantly, David. As the day of their wedding arrived, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. There were no extravagant decorations, no grand gestures, just the two of them, standing in front of the people they loved, promising to support each other through whatever life had in store. As David slid the ring onto her finger, their eyes locked, and Emily felt a deep sense of gratitude wash over her. This was it. This was the beginning of their forever. The reception was filled with laughter, dancing, and love, and for the first time in a long time, Emily felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Later that evening, as the last of their guests left and the two of them stood alone, hand in hand, Emily looked up at David. "We made it," she said, her voice filled with emotion. David smiled down at her, his expression soft. "We did," he replied, squeezing her hand. "And we'll continue to make it, every day, for the rest of our lives." Emily leaned into him, feeling the weight of everything they had been through and the beauty of what they had built together. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," David said, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "And this is just the beginning." As they walked into their future, side by side, Emily knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as partners, as equals, and as soulmates. The months that followed Emily and David's wedding were filled with growth, both as individuals and as a couple. Their bond, forged through trials and triumphs, had only deepened since they made their vows. Emily continued to thrive in her career, rising through the ranks with determination and a newfound confidence, while David, ever the steady support, was there beside her every step of the way, offering guidance and encouragement. Together, they found balance in their lives, between their personal aspirations and the demands of their professional worlds. Yet, even as everything seemed to be falling into place, life had its way of throwing new challenges their way. Emily had always dreamed of starting her own art studio, a dream that had been put on hold for so long as she focused on work and the responsibilities that came with it. But one evening, as she sat at her desk, she found herself staring at the portfolio she had put together years ago. It was a reminder of her passion, a part of her that she had nearly forgotten. She realized then that she couldn't keep putting her dreams aside. She needed to make it happen. But the question was, how? Starting an art studio, especially with the financial pressures she had faced in the past, seemed daunting. She talked to David about it one night, unsure of how he would react. "I've been thinking about my art," she began, her voice hesitant. "I've always wanted to open my own studio, but I've never known where to start. It feels impossible." David looked at her, his expression soft but focused. "I think it's a wonderful idea," he said, his voice steady. "You've always had the talent and the passion, and now you have the confidence to make it a reality. We'll figure out the logistics together." Emily was surprised by how easily he supported her idea. She had expected him to be cautious, to remind her of the risks, but instead, he was encouraging. "You believe in me," she whispered, a little taken aback by his unwavering faith in her. "I always have," he said with a smile. "And I always will. You've worked so hard for everything you've achieved, but don't forget that your dreams matter too. We'll make this happen, Emily. You're not alone in this." With his encouragement, Emily took the first steps toward turning her dream into reality. She started researching locations, finding space that would be both affordable and inspiring, while balancing her responsibilities at work. David was there, supporting her in every way he could, whether it was offering advice, helping with the financial planning, or simply being her sounding board when doubts crept in. Soon, they found a small space in the heart of the city, a place that felt full of potential. It wasn't large, but it had character, and it was everything Emily needed to get started. With David's help, she secured the funding and began the process of turning the empty space into her dream studio. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of setbacks along the way, but with each hurdle, Emily grew more determined. She poured her heart and soul into creating a space that would inspire others, just as she had once dreamed. The grand opening of the studio was a small but significant moment in their lives. Emily stood in the center of the studio, surrounded by her paintings, sculptures, and the bright-eyed faces of those who had come to celebrate with her. David stood beside her, his presence a quiet strength, and as they looked around the room, they both knew that this was just the beginning. Emily had taken a leap of faith, and now she was seeing the fruits of her labor. She had turned her passion into something tangible, something that was hers. The studio wasn't just a dream realized. It was a testament to the power of believing in oneself and in the people who love you. As the evening wore on, the space filled with laughter, music, and the warmth of friends and family who were there to support her. Emily felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. Her life was no longer just about surviving. It was about thriving, and it was about living her truth. Later, as the last guests left and the lights of the studio dimmed, Emily and David stood alone in the quiet of the room. She turned to him, her heart full of gratitude. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "Thank you for believing in me, for supporting me, even when I didn't believe in myself." David smiled and pulled her close. "You've always had it in you, Emily," he said softly. "I just helped you see it." The future stretched out before them, filled with endless possibilities. They both knew there would be challenges ahead, but they were ready to face them together, as partners, as equals, and as the people who had helped each other become the best versions of themselves. As they walked out of the studio that night, hand in hand, Emily felt a quiet sense of joy settle over her. This was her life, full of love, full of purpose, and full of the promise of what was yet to come. As time passed, Emily's art studio became not just a business, but a sanctuary of creativity. It was a space where people came to express themselves, to explore their artistic talents, and to find a sense of peace. The studio grew, and so did Emily's confidence. She had proven to herself that she could turn her dreams into reality. She was no longer the unsure woman who had once struggled to make ends meet. She was a woman who had built something from the ground up, and that realization filled her with a deep sense of accomplishment. With David's unwavering support, she had overcome her doubts, learned to balance her personal and professional lives, and created a space that brought her joy every day. But as their success continued to grow, they faced new challenges. Emily and David's love for each other remained strong, but the demands of their respective careers began to take a toll on their time together. Emily's studio required more of her attention, and David's role as CEO of his company often pulled him in different directions. There were moments when they felt the strain of balancing it all. Emily found herself working late nights at the studio, while David traveled frequently for business. There were days when they barely saw each other, and when they did, the exhaustion from their busy schedules left little room for quality time. Yet, despite the distance, their bond remained strong. They had built a foundation of trust, understanding, and love that helped them navigate even the most challenging times. One evening, as Emily sat in her office at the studio, she looked around the room at the art she had created, the workshops she had led, and the relationships she had built with her students. It was everything she had ever wanted, but it wasn't enough. She wanted more, not in terms of success or material things, but in terms of her life with David. She missed him, the quiet moments they used to share, the little gestures of love that had once made them feel so connected, had become rare. She realized then that she needed to make a change. The next day, she made a decision. She sat down with David, who had just returned from a business trip, and shared her feelings with him. "David," she began, her voice soft but determined. "I've been thinking a lot lately. I love the studio, and I love what we've built together. But I miss us. I miss the time we used to spend together, the moments when we could just be with each other without worrying about work or other things. I don't want to keep running at full speed all the time. I want us to focus on what really matters, our relationship, our life together." David listened intently, his expression serious as he took in her words. He had been feeling the same way but hadn't known how to express it. After a long pause, he nodded slowly. "I've been thinking the same thing," he admitted. "We've both been so caught up in our work, in the hustle and bustle of everything, that we've lost sight of the simple things that brought us together in the first place. I don't want to lose that. I want to prioritize us, Emily. You're the most important thing in my life." Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her as she heard his words. For the first time in a long time, she felt like they were on the same page again. They had always been a team, but somewhere along the way, they had let the demands of life get in the way of their relationship. Now, they were ready to change that. They decided to take a step back from their careers and take time for themselves. Emily reduced her hours at the studio, and David began delegating more tasks to his team. They spent weekends together, exploring new places, trying new things, and rediscovering the joy of being in each other's company without the distractions of work. They also reconnected with their friends and families, making time for the people who had always supported them. The more they focused on their relationship, the more they realized how much they had missed the simple, everyday moments that had once brought them so much happiness. As the months passed, their connection grew even stronger. Emily and David learned to balance their careers and personal lives, always keeping their love at the center of everything. They continued to build their future together, not just as business partners, but as life partners. They knew there would always be challenges, but with the foundation they had built, they were ready to face whatever came their way. One evening, as they sat on the couch in their cozy living room, David turned to Emily, a smile playing at the corners of his lips. "You know, I never thought I could love you more than I already do," he said, his voice filled with affection. Emily smiled back, her heart full. "But you do," she said softly. "And I love you more every day." And in that moment, as they sat there together, hands intertwined, they both knew that their journey together was just beginning. The road ahead might not always be easy, but as long as they had each other, they could handle anything life threw their way. The love they shared was the anchor that kept them grounded, and with that love, they would continue to build the life they had always dreamed of, a life filled with joy, laughter, and, above all, the unwavering support of each other.